This is Unexpected with Hannah Love. In this podcast, you will gain a new perspective of how God loves you enough to call you to things that you couldn't have imagined for yourself. Hi, guys. So last week, I know I mentioned how difficult it is to sometimes get plugged into a community. And if you're like me, that can be overwhelming and sometimes intimidating. So today, I just want to encourage you that there is an option for you. Today, I want to introduce you to the Christian Appalachian Project. There are volunteer opportunities for short-term individuals like cooks, nurses, and home repair crew leaders. And there are also opportunities to become one-year volunteers. You can assist seniors living in isolation, teach preschoolers basic skills to be ready for kindergarten, mentor and invest in teens, and serve at food pantries. CAP has one mission, but many ways to serve. Volunteers come from a wide variety of backgrounds with a diverse set of skills. So if you believe you can make a difference in Appalachia, CAP would love to hear from you. You would join the many volunteers who are committed to serving and building relationships with the community. So friends, if you want to help build hope, transform lives, and share Christ's love through service in Appalachia, I want to encourage you today. This is your chance. Visit christianapp.org/volunteer to learn more. Hello, everybody. I have got a very, very special guest today. I know I say that every time, but this one, maybe I'm a little partial because I have sitting across from me my handsome, sweet, precious husband, Shay Mooney. I could give you the whole, award-winning, triple Grammy, all the spiel, but I'm just going to tell you he's a good man, and he's the man I married, and I love him dearly. And that's who he is to me, and he's also the daddy to our babies, and I'm happy to have you here today.
Well, it's good to be here. That was quite the intro right there.
It wasn't my
I'm feeling
best,
honored.
But at least it's you, so there's no judgment here.
Well, there we go.
So I thought that I would have you on today and share a little bit about your story, because it's riddled with the unexpected. And then we can kind of segue into us and our story and how God has worked for us and in us and through us. So,
absolutely.
So you go ahead. Let's just start out with a bang, and you tell everybody a little bit about you.
All right. Well, let's dive right in. No, I love that your podcast is called Unexpected, because looking, throughout both of our lives, it's both just riddled with the unexpected. I feel like that perfectly sums up our life, really, in so many ways. And especially, even before we met, my career, everything that's kind of ever happened to me has been something that's come from a very unexpected place. I moved to Nashville when I was about 18 years old. I moved from Atlanta after getting assigned to T-Pain.
No. I'm not going to let you get off the hook. You have to start You have to start.
We're starting younger than that.
Younger than that. When you left home, where did you go first?
It's been a long time ago. I'm 80 years old now. I don't remember. So I guess we'll back up a little bit.
Yeah, I have a leg up on you. I know a little bit about you.
You do know a little bit about me. So I grew up, I guess we'll go back to about 5 years old. Probably the first time that I stood in front of the church in the booster band. There was a thing called the booster band, which I used to say that and expect people to kind of know what that is, but it's definitely very, that's specific probably to maybe our church. I have no idea. I don't think I've heard that anywhere else.
I've heard of the booster, but I'm also from rural Arkansas. So.
Well, I think it's just a rural thing in general, I guess. But grew up about 5 years old. Me and my sisters grew up singing in the church, and that's kind of my first. I was never the, super standout singer. I was not the prodigy that some kids are. But I grew up just loving singing, and that kind of carried on. Everybody in my family, as you know, does something in music. So mom played the piano, dad would play steel guitar and bass, and Erica and Gabby, my two sisters, would sing. And everyone sings. That's kind of a given. But yeah, we did that all throughout my entire childhood. And I think by the time I was about, 9 years old, we were traveling around to different churches. And we would go to, I don't even know who booked these gigs. I think maybe it was just mom or dad. I don't know who was doing it, but we'd just go to these churches that were like 5 hours away somewhere. We probably played in your area sometimes on the other side of Arkansas. But we would just go to these churches and we would sing, all three of us, and we had several different names from the the Singing Moonies. Mom tried to get us to go by Moon Song once.
Moon Song, it's my favorite.
That was a good one.
Still want to use it.
Yeah, I might bring it back. I don't know. But no, it was a blast. We would go around and sing at all these churches, and I really just loved doing it. And I think, I don't know how old I was. I was probably 8 or 9 the first time we came to Nashville. And we actually made a gospel album when I was like 8 years old. I think it was around 8. And I remember telling my dad then, I was like, I want to be a singer. Like, I want to do this. And he was like, I think you will. And that was just kind of my first taste of Nashville and going into the studio, which was extremely exciting for me because I was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, coming to Nashville is a very magical place anyways, and I've always felt that. But even just driving down the road, you would see a tour bus, and you'd be like, that's probably Kenny Chesney. You know what I mean? You would think that's the most famous person that you've ever seen in your life. And that was just, the whole thing was very exciting to me. And anyways, fast forward to, doing that. I was never the standout singer, but eventually when I was about 16, people started to be like, Shay's actually, he's really good. And I knew that I had it in me. And that was kind of when I really started to go after, like, all right, I was starting to write songs and things like that. So that's kind of when I knew, like, all right, I'm going to do this no matter what. This is kind of my career path. And I had won a singing competition in 2009 that gave me a free ride to go to college. And thankfully I have amazing parents that were like, it's okay if you don't take that degree. And I was like, because it was to music school, and it was like I was going to go, and I ended up passing that up and signing my first record deal after going to a 9-month ministry school with Gabby.
And where was this?
And this was up in Pittsburgh.
Okay, so how old were you?
Just turned 18, I guess. Yeah. So I just graduated, and instead of going to school, to go into college, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a year off and go to this ministry school with Gabby, because she was going up there, and I was like, I don't have anything better to do, and Pittsburgh sounds pretty cool. And this is the biggest city I've ever been to, So, I took that. We went to school there for about 9 months and got to go to Sweden for like 3 months and hang out there and kind of experience, traveling for the first time. And then after that, I ended up signing a record deal with T-Pain, rapper out of Atlanta and rapper turned singer. It was his first album.
So that's a little bit of a shift.
Yeah, a little bit of a shift from my life.
Ministry school to T-Pain in
very,
Atlanta,
very different.
And you were an 18-year-old.
Yes, it was coming from middle of nowhere, Arkansas. It was a very big shift in my life. I mean, Pittsburgh was that for me as well, but going into that whole world was very exciting, but it was also just opened my mind up to a lot of things that I probably never should have been around. There was a lot of drugs and things around that I didn't participate in, but it was a kind of a crazy world to be just kind of pushed into all of a sudden. That was a kind of wild thing. So I kind of was there for about a year and a half, and I knew that obviously Atlanta and Nashville are not too far away. It's about a 4.5 hour drive that I made very regularly when I started coming to Nashville, and I didn't know exactly what my life was looking like. I just knew I had a record deal and I hadn't put out a single song, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is kind of crazy. I'm just here. I'm recording till 6 a.m. sometimes, just because that's literally all I did. I'd wake up and we'd get there at the studio at about 8:30 in the morning, and I would write songs and record them all day long until about 6 in the morning. And that was my life for a year and a half. And I wasn't getting anywhere. I felt like I was spinning my wheels. And then I started traveling to Nashville, and I was, paying out of my own pocket. And I had no money. I mean, I was probably making maybe $2,000 was what I was given per month, which was, I was paying $500 for rent here in Nashville at the same time as I was paying a manager $500 a month. And so I had about, if I did the math, I think it was about like $320 after gas.
It's pretty specific.
It was very specific, because you had to be when you only got $320 in your pocket. And so that was kind of what I was living off of. And I was just, it was just a crazy thing. And, going to the first very unexpected moment in my life. Well, the first one, I guess, would say would be getting my first record deal, when I was so young, didn't know what I was doing. But coming to Nashville, I got a text message from a buddy that I was actually staying on their couch at the time. He said, hey man, there's these guys that are having a party tonight if you want to come. And I was like, I'm not doing anything else, might as well. And he was like, all right. And he's like, I'll pick you up. And when he said, I'll pick you up, he was actually at the house with me. And he was like, I'll pick you up. And he just came downstairs. And I was like, all right, here we go. And that was actually, it was 507 Morton Avenue was the address. And we all lived in the crappiest houses. I mean, we were all songwriters trying to make it, and we were in the worst houses. And I remember I walked up to a guy named Dan Smayer's front door, and I think it was probably around 6:00 at this time, or it was just getting dark. We were pretty sure that was the address, but I walked up to the front door, and the door was just like kind of broken. It was locked, and so I was like, "We know this is the house, but we can't get in." And so the window was kind of, imagine a plexiglass window, and it was bent, and so you had to reach inside of the door to open up the door from the other side, and that was how I got in. And basically, I walked into this house that was the living room. They had taken sheets from a thrift store to keep the heat in. They didn't have like heat and air. So they had hung them from the ceiling and created like a tent in the living room.
Was this December?
This was this was December 7th, and this was 2012.
Okay.
And so I walked in there, and that was the first time I met Dan and a guy named Andy Albert, who now writes a lot of songs with us, but they were in a band together at the time. Justin Richards, which is our guitar player, they were all there. Patrick Tracy, who does all of our video stuff, they were all there at this house party. It was basically just us, So we walked in there and we kind of hit it off, and we ended up playing songs for each other, till probably 3 a.m, and just kind of the typical Nashville hang, playing songs for each other. And Dan and I just really hit it off. And the next morning we got up very early. Back in the day, we had some stamina. We could stay up late playing songs, and we would get up really early and write songs.
The early part's what I have trouble with.
I know. That's probably something you struggle with, thinking me getting up early. But no, we woke up and we went to Starbucks, and we ended up writing 2 songs that day. And it was just the first song we wrote got put on hold for Rascal Flatts, and we were just like, well, that was easy. We thought we had made it, because Rascal Flatts heard our song. We were like, we're the biggest band on planet Earth. We've done it. I can retire. And that was it was a crazy moment because, one night that I just randomly went to this party and met Dan completely changed, my whole life as far as my career goes. And it was just a crazy thing. We started, writing every day, and we wrote probably 120 songs in the first month and a half, and ended up going to do showcases. And, we weren't put together. It was a very, natural, organic thing. And it just kind of happened. And we're still doing kind of the same crap, just writing songs and playing them for people. And it was very, very unexpected, but that one moment changed my whole life.
Now, that's not to say that this was an easy transition, because then you had to
definitely not
officially become a duo with Dan. And I know more of the backstory, but you had to get out of your deal with T-Pain.
Yeah, there's a lot of complicated,
because I signed
there's a lot of growing pains, with that, but we got through that. It was definitely very difficult. It's easy for me to look back now and be like, oh, it was a great time. We met and we wrote some songs, and then we made it. It's a lot more complicated than that. But, in that first 2 years that we got signed, I think that 1 year we did 270 shows in 1 year, which is, I hadn't met you at that point, but that's a lot of shows.
A lot of shows.
I can't imagine, doing that now. It would just be impossible. But we really grinded it out. And it was a good time in my life because it was very meant to be, because obviously if I would have met you at that point, and if we had kids, there's no way. I don't know if I would have had it in me to do what it took to make it.
You would have.
Maybe. But it was just, looking back now, I don't know how we did some of the things we did. It was just it was a crazy, you're not sleeping, you're going to radio stations at 5:30 in the morning and singing at radio shows. I mean, you hear my voice now. This is my early voice. This is trying to sing like I do, like a woman, is very difficult to do at 5:30 in the morning.
You know what my Meemaw says about young people? She'll say, oh, honey, you're young and super. You're young and super, and that's how you did it, baby.
Young and super. I was young and super back then.
We're a little less young now.
Yeah,
but
a little less super nowadays, but you're still super.
Oh,
you still look good, I'm on the edge.
Wow.
I'm almost there.
I don't think so. Okay, so give me a little bit of a transition here. How would you say, looking back, God was in that season of preparation for you?
Oh, man.
Because for me, what's always been hard is because knowing your family and knowing your background, knowing how conservative and how really sheltered we both were growing up, and you went from a just turned 18-year-old moving to Pittsburgh, going to ministry school, serving in Switzerland, and going out and like really learning how to like be the hands and feet for Jesus and getting out of your comfort zone to, living with T-Pain. So I feel like for me, that would have been internally such a struggle. How did you, I don't know, how did you balance that? How did you process that giant life
Mammoth
change?
of a wave. I think a lot of it was just prayer was being put on me. I know that. And I mean,
So for all you mamas listening,
Yeah.
you just keep praying for your babies.
You got my mom. You know my mom. You've met her, right? You've met her. I said that like you didn't know my mom. You know, if you ever met Cindy Mooney, you know that she is a prayer warrior. And I mean, I cannot imagine the warpath that she must have been on when I was in Atlanta. I mean, it was a very hostile environment in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that toward T-Pain or anybody. There's a lot of great people, but just the environment that I was in and the situations that I found myself in were
polar opposite from
what I grew up in. And it was just a very eye-opening, kind of crazy moment, shell shock really, from what I was used to. So I think a lot of prayer was had and sent my way. And I think the biggest reason that I was able to kind of make those transitions, because it was, when I look back on it, it was just, there was a lot of crazy stuff that happened that really like kind of, I didn't really have time to process then. You know, even just being signed and moving to a new city alone, you know, after someone who's been in Natural Dam, Arkansas, a city of 511 people for my entire life until this point. And I know that, you know, they talk a lot on the Sounds Fun Network about the Enneagram, and I am a 7 like Annie. So I am an adventurer. So I went down that path wholeheartedly ready to face anything, you know. And so I didn't take a lot of time trying to process those things about what was happening to me and how I was going to get there, which I think is a part of the reason that, you know, I've had success in the music world, is because you have to go in not asking questions. You just got to go. You know, I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'm either going to be, you know, at Madison Square Garden or I'm going to be on the stage on Broadway, you know, but I'll be happy to do either.
Right. Doing
you know?
it with all of you.
Doing with all of me. But I think my point that I was trying to make, I'm not very good with my words, but I think that the main reason that I was able to kind of transition into, you know, what God had for me next was my foundation. And I know that was a huge deal growing up. My parents, you know them, you've met them as we've established, how big of a deal that was for really anybody, you know, having, you know, moving forward in business or whatever it is you want to do in your life. I think I heard a quote one time that was about, you know, your kids, and it says, you know, your ceiling is your children's floor.
You heard that from me.
I think I heard that from
You did.
a woman named Hannah Mooney. But I love that, you know, that idea, because I truly, the roots that were put in place for me were so deep and so grounded in the Lord, and just having so much wisdom around me, I think really helped me in those moments where I was kind of alone and didn't have anybody.
And what I know about you and what I recognized in your heart when I met you was, we've talked about this through the years, just that time and that season you were in, and how you just felt, I don't know that you've said it this way, but just felt lost.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of, especially young people who are coming out of college or coming out of high school, and they're trying to figure out what that next step is, and they feel really overwhelmed and really lost. I think that that's like a place where you can really, really determine the trajectory of your life. You know, they say 1 degree off here is how many miles in the future. Yeah. And so for me, when I listened to you talk about your story, you saying that you felt, I mean, you didn't say this, but in my heart, I feel like you felt lost and like it was too much and it wasn't right.
Yeah.
That life wasn't right, and you knew it, and your heart just...
My heart definitely recognized that it was not where I wanted to be.
And you did your best as a, 19, 20-year-old to remove yourself from that situation.
Definitely.
Right? And I think that speaks volumes to your foundations and to character, because I don't know a lot of young kids that would be in that position and say, hey, I think maybe I should like get out of this a little bit, instead of, this is awesome, look at all these cool people that are around and celebrities, and look at all, you know. Yeah. So that's awesome.
It was amazing to look back on now. It's so funny, because I know there's a lot of kids out here, you know, in the world, and especially in Nashville. You know, this is a city of a lot of young people who move here with dreams, and it's incredible and it's very inspiring and it's a magical place. But there's so many times, I mean, when I was here, like before our career kind of took off, it can be a very lonely place when you just have no idea. It's like, you move here and it's exciting until you hit that first roadblock and you're just like, well, what am I doing? What am I doing? And what stinks about it is it's not only they're not just telling you that you didn't get your dream job. They're telling you that you didn't get your dream, which is like, and that's going to make me emotional because
that's what you were made to do.
Yeah, so many friends who have not done it.
Yeah.
And that's a very
we've talked about this.
Thing.
We don't we don't even want our boys to do it because it's 1 in a million. And and more than that, it's in a lot of ways it's God ordained, I think, because this industry is not conducive to a healthy life in a lot of ways. I don't think God created us to be
in a spotlight of any sort. It's definitely not made to do this.
Right. And so fortunately for us, and we can get into this later, we've been given resources to go to that have helped us in our marriage in this season. But going back to something that you were talking about is, the people that move here and they have these big dreams. And you and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of people get lost in that. Yeah. Like they get here and it's exciting and there are a lot of opportunities, quote unquote, but one wrong step after another with the wrong people around you can quickly lead you into a cycle.
For sure. I call that the Nashville black hole. Is what I've always referred to it as.
It's hard and it's sad because you just want to tell people, remember what you started for. Yeah. Remember where your foundations are. I'm not saying you're all going to make it, but don't get lost in the process. Yeah. What would you say to someone who is here and who may be like going down that road and be very tempted to just continue because that's what they know and that's comfortable and that's security for them?
Yeah, man, there's so many things that I would, advice that I would give people, and it's really certain things that I would say would be person to person, because some people, not everyone can make it, which is a sad thing, and for some people it's like, you might want to find another career path, it would be like something
like me. Would you tell me that, Ben?
Yeah, I would not tell you that.
Oh, but you should.
But it's, it's so tough when you're dealing in dreams because these are people's, not what they want to do just for a living, but they want to do this because they were 5 years old and they, were like me driving down and seeing like a tour bus and they're like, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it's just not in the cards for some people. And that's not what God has for you. And I think, being okay with, what you've been given and kind of being empowered by, maybe you don't get to be a singer and sing on a big stage, but there's so many other outlets in music, that you can do if you love music like I do. I think if I wasn't a singer, like I'd do something. I'd be either learning how to play guitar.
You might not be a touring singer, but
I might not be any good, but I'd still be singing. But there's just, it's tough. I think that, one thing that kids that move here have to realize is that it's not just because, you sacrifice everything and you move here. I think that this was a quote that I heard. I think actually Dan told me this quote a long time ago, and it might have been John Lennon or Paul McCartney. One of them said, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't want to work hard. And that always stuck with me because it was, there's a lot of talented people and there's a lot of, that are just God-gifted human beings and they have a lot of talent, but they don't want to work hard. They don't want to, have to have a job and actually work and do it. And I think that in order to make it, you have to have this reckless abandon of like, I didn't have a job when I worked here. I was just simply poor. There's obviously some people at some point you have to get a job. That's such a complicated, it's easy for me to say because it did work out for us, thankfully. And I was only homeless for a little while, and it was, there has to be this reckless abandon of, I'm going to make this happen.
Not reckless,
no matter
just a
what.
pursuit.
For sure. And it's not reckless, but reckless abandon of, in saying that, I mean, you have to be willing to give up everything in order to make it. I mean, I think about the amount of hours that we spent touring and doing all these things in order to make this dream work. I think it looks a lot easier in your head when you're dreaming about, I'm going to move to Nashville and become a singer. You think like, I'll sign and then like I'll just show up at an arena and there will just be people there. That's like what you imagine in your head. But instead, you're going to play a place with 100 people and maybe just a bartender and a bouncer, and you're going to do that for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to tell 5 people, and then they're going to tell 5 people, and hopefully you make a business out of it. But it's a crazy world that we live in here. But Nashville has always been, to me, I think there is a lot of prayers in Nashville. There's so many great people and so many great networks and people like Annie, that are pushing this music business and just this whole world that they're kind of cultivating in a good way
of community.
And I just think that when you're supposed to make it, you do. And I think people put, God puts calls on people's lives, and I was meant to be a singer, and I was meant to do this and kind of, and give the glory to Him. And, I was supposed to do this. And I always think about, what if I didn't go to that party that one night? I truly think that I probably would have met Dan somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that things are supposed to happen, and there's a million different, things that could go wrong, I guess, in your mind, and you're thinking like, oh, if I wouldn't have did that or been so stupid, then I'd.
Well, I mean, if you hadn't been obedient to that knowing deep in your spirit, of this is wrong and I need to get out of it, then you probably wouldn't have moved to Nashville and met Dan, right? Like that obedience leads to the next door that God has for you.
Yeah. Your choices are always going to affect, but the thing that is incredible about God is, His grace is new every morning. And for someone living in Nashville trying to make it, that's a great thing to have, because I feel like we make mistakes all the time, obviously. And, your choices, every choice you make has a consequence or an effect. And I think it's for a lot of young people, you just have to keep going and have that reckless abandon. I think for me, the biggest thing that I've probably learned through all of this is that it's amazing that we've got to do all these things, but that's not where I find my joy. It's not where I find my peace, and that's been a huge thing that I had to learn, because I identified as this
I feel like
singer.
we need to go back now
Yes.
and start from our first years, because there's been a lot of growth in both of us to get to that point that you just said. Like, where is my joy found?
Absolutely. I mean, that was, I guess we can rewind to about 2014? 2014.
The very beginning of it.
Yes. So we don't have to go through our
We don't have to go through the whole thing, and I have told this story before.
Yes.
But we knew of each other for a couple of years. We're both from Arkansas. If you're from the same state, it becomes a small pond pretty quickly. We knew a lot of the same people, and eventually you ended up playing. I mean, I will say, this is a God thing right here. I messaged you on a Saturday night. I asked you when you played in Arkansas. You said Wednesday. And I think in like the last 7 years, you've been in Arkansas twice.
Yeah, we never played
and
there.
That was one of them. And so, like, legitimately 3 days later, 4 days later, you came to Arkansas, not just to Arkansas, but in the town I was living in.
Which you lived.
And so you came. We'd never met in person, and I came with one of my girlfriends, perched up high, I could see you looking for me the whole show.
I looked for you the whole time.
You did, and you couldn't find me. I was so pumped. I didn't know any of your music.
No,
and I
didn't even like it.
Well, no.
Yeah.
I would never have admitted to you, though, that like when you were sitting there singing Ed Sheeran, that I was totally blown away. But like I said, I would never have. I was just like, it's
you
fun.
were fighting it, and we were both in places, I think, honestly, and I
was not fighting it. I was not interested
you
in
were
a
not
dating
having it
relationship
at all. And we were both in a place, and I've told you this too. I mean, you meet a couple people. We both had like some people that we dated that it was just for whatever reason, they're great people, but just it wasn't right. And I thought maybe in my head I was thinking, well, maybe it's just because like, our career is taking off, and maybe it's so early in this thing that I am probably not ready to settle down yet. I think that's what I thought in my head. And as soon as you walked off, because I made you come say hi to my parents.
Your whole family
my
was
whole
there.
family was
I mean,
there.
I didn't just meet you. I met your mom, your dad, your
crew.
sister, your brother-in-law. Like the
You
whole
did.
crew was there.
You met everybody. And I remember my
I was
best friend
appalled.
as well.
I was shocked.
You were. And my best friend, Benji Davis, was there, songwriter friend of mine. And I remember when you walked off the bus, I had literally said to him, I said, I'm going to marry that girl.
He did.
And I walked you to your car and asked if you'd go with me to the ACMs.
No, first you asked in front of everyone.
I did. Well, that way
really
it'd be harder
put me
to
on the
say
spot. I know.
no.
And I tried to say no, and then you asked me again.
Yes.
What did I say?
You said you'll go as a friend.
Yes.
Well,
so for
fast
all
forward,
of you out there that have been put in the friend zone,
don't quit.
Don't give up hope, because
you tried to put me in the friend zone. I climbed out of that thing.
Did.
I climbed out hard. I flew out of there.
You clawed out of that.
I flew out of that thing.
Took you a while, but anyway, fast forward. Go ahead.
So fast forward,
you were my one, but I did fight that because I was not.
For sure.
I had been through some things.
Yeah.
And so you were really persistent. And I always said that you had the patience of Job, because you knew that I had been really hurt. And there was just this assuredness that I felt from you that you didn't care, because I knew that you loved me, and I knew that my heart would be safe with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that was part of the reason that I panicked, because I was like, no. This is
not ready for this.
He is not my type. He is not, I don't want to be with someone that's in this industry. And I actually say this a lot. You've heard me say it through the years, is that I didn't choose what you do. I chose you.
Yeah.
Kind of despite it, because I really, really, to me, the industry that you were in represented a lot of potential hurt.
Yeah. And
so for me, I wanted to be as far away as humanly possible, but God had other plans, because he was like,
he knew I needed my anchor.
Your one.
Especially then, that's kind of when everything changed. Because for me, I was, it didn't seem like it, because I knew immediately that I was going to marry you. But I was also not looking.
Which is bizarre, because you weren't looking, and you were on your radio tour?
We were on an actual tour.
It was your first tour.
It was our first tour ever. And I was not looking. That's like the last thing that I was looking for would be a girlfriend, at that time. It was like, that's everyone's last thought, whenever you're a young single guy that's just now, let's get locked down now, That was not what I was thinking, but it was just, I understood of my dad and everybody always saying like, all right, this is when you know. And I knew, and it was for the first time, I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Got it. And it was just this assuredness of that's who I want to spend the rest of my life with. And it was a very scary thing, at the beginning, but it was what came next. I knew that God was kind of laying the groundwork of, kind of what he was going to do in our lives. And I guess that kind of takes us, that was all very unexpected, but then the most unexpected thing happened, I guess, about a year later.
Yeah. We dated long distance for a year. Yeah. You asked Dad's blessing. Let's see, we went and looked at rings in January. You went and asked for Dad's blessing Mother's Day weekend. You tried to be sneaky about it, but it took you forever to come back to the car. And
I was like, I got to go grab some water.
Yeah, and you were gone for like 30 minutes.
For so long.
And we were supposed to be leaving. And so I knew, I think you were in shock, because my dad's a large man and probably pretty intimidating. And you said that he had asked you, several questions about taking care of me. And anyway, about 8 weeks later, found out we were pregnant.
Yes. Talk about unexpected. We had just started the Darius Rucker tour. We were opening up for him.
It was the first day of the tour.
The very first day. And it was our first big tour. And it was like, it's very exciting. I got this smoking hot girlfriend that I'm definitely going to marry. Things were exciting. And then it was about probably 9 p.m. at night or something.
Gosh, I held on to it for a while.
You did. You told my sister first, which I did not appreciate.
Well, I messaged her and I was like, I can't tell him. He is on a bus with 13 other guys, and there's no privacy. I can't
Keep
ruin
in mind
his
that
first
buses,
day of tour.
Even a crew bus only holds 12 people, and we had 13.
Yeah,
so imagine the debauchery that was going on there. It was just people, sleeping on the floors, and it was an insane.
Debauchery might not be the right
debauchery
word.
is not the right word, but what I mean by that is a lot of stinky guys on one bus. It was pretty disgusting. It was very late at night, and
Erica was like, "No, you have to tell him." And I was like, "I can't tell him."
It was the night before our first show with Darius, and we were driving to the show, and I just remember you texting me and saying, "You said we can get through anything, right?" And I was like, "Yeah," not knowing what the next text message was going to be, and I couldn't call you because everybody on the bus was sleeping, and so you texted me a picture of the pregnancy test, and I was like, oh my gosh, it hit me like a ton of bricks, because it really felt at that time that someone just slammed on the brakes of everything. It's literally, I'm doing my first, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, am I leaving tour? Like, what, what am I?
I mean, I don't think either of us did.
We just didn't know what that meant, but it was also, it was just all a lot at the time. We both handled it with grace. We didn't freak out. We freaked out, but we didn't. Yeah.
I would say for me, I was more in shock, and I'm really good at compartmentalizing and just pretending that nothing's wrong here, everything's fine. And so for me, and I didn't see you for another month. Maybe
it was a long time. The first time that I saw you, we were playing in Dallas on Father's Day weekend, and
it was the first time I'd seen you in person. Nobody knew except us, and so I think your family was there, your friends were there, and we just like hugged one another, and kind of were teary because we knew nobody else knew, but like we knew that life was like
about to drastically change.
I mean, it was already changed. And for me, and it's not something I've talked about a lot, but it was definitely the hardest, I would say, from that point until the first year, until Asher's first year. So for the next 2 years was probably the hardest season of my life, because everything happened so quickly. And I just remember telling you, I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And you weren't ready. But I also thank God for the foundations that our parents laid, because at that point, it didn't matter, because it was a life.
It was never an option to either not have the baby or, put him up for adoption. That was never, the only option was, thankfully, that we're having this baby, and we're going to be rock star parents, is I think the attitude that I was trying to have, of like, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
We're going to do it. I don't mean an actual rock star, but, trying to be amazing parents,
You came through the door and you hugged me and you said, it's going to be okay. And I mean, neither of us thought it was going to be okay.
Panicked.
but there was nothing else to say. And there was no other choice really for us to make, which I get emotional about it now, because
it's too early to be crying over here. You got me.
I know. I get emotional about it now, just because, what our country's going through and the choices that people are making and the laws that are being in place about, abortion. And it just breaks my heart. And this, my sweet, precious friend and counselor has said to me before, sometimes I think that the babies that we didn't plan for are the ones that God wants here the most.
Yeah.
Because he planned for them. And it wrecks me every time, because we didn't plan for that baby, but God knew him.
Yeah.
And formed him before the foundations of the earth.
Yeah.
And so I'm just really thankful that we had that foundation that our parents put in place for us.
Yeah.
Now, telling them, and that whole situation was really hard. And I
don't think you told your dad until after we were married.
Dad was the last one that, sorry, Dad.
Sorry, Kirby.
I told Mom, and I thought Mom would tell Dad, but she said she just couldn't. And so, anyway, sorry. I mean, I'm just weepy over
this
here.
This is really just the therapy sessions with the Moonies.
Therapy session. Welcome to Moonsong Part 1.
Welcome to Moonsong Part 1. No, it was an insane time.
It was,
and not to harp on that too much, but I think that, those moments, and I think this is kind of just to wrap up everything that your podcast is about, is all of this,
how God works in the unexpected.
Exactly. Every single moment that I look back and these kind of checkpoints of my life of being like, oh yeah, that was a life changer. Oh yeah, that was a life changer. Oh yeah, that changed everything. Every one of those moments were so blatantly unobvious, and it was so blatantly God doing this, and it was the most unexpected moments. I mean, walking into a house party, meeting Dan. I mean, honestly, getting to Pittsburgh was an insane. The only reason I'm going to tell this backstory is because this is perfectly aligns with unexpected. The only reason that we went to that ministry school, let me take you through the sequence of events that happened. So I was about 17, and I had won that singing competition, and we were going to visit schools. And so I went up to some like youth conference to go check out this school, and Gabby came with me. And at the time, Gabby and I were not very close, and she was doing a rock band. She was kind of doing her own thing. Wasn't really paying attention whatsoever to God. Didn't like, was kind of running from any kind of calling. So we get up to this ministry, and during worship, we were sitting there, and Gabby, I think she was feeling, this is her words, not mine, she was feeling really convicted. So she walked out to the hallway. It was like, I'm going to get out of here. And she walked around the corner, and the first person she saw was like, "Hey, what's up?" And just like said hi. And it was this guy named Billy Chester. I don't know how I remembered his name. I haven't seen him in 10 years, but he walked up to Gabby and was like, "Hey," gave her a pamphlet and like, "You should check this out." And out of nowhere, Gabby just like radically gets called to this place and was like, wakes up one morning and was like, "God told me to go to this ministry school." And it was just like, what are you talking about? You are going to ministry school. This is insane. And so we got back, from this trip, and that happened like the next morning. She was like, "I'm going to this ministry school." And I literally, for whatever reason, like very confidently was just like, "Yeah, I'll go too.
I'm going with you.
I'm going to go with you." And so just the fact that she walked out there, she saw that and got the pamphlet. So long story short, we end up going to Pittsburgh together. And that is where Gabby actually met a backup dancer for T-Pain. And that's how that whole thing kind of started to spin its web, and kind of making my journey to Nashville was literally off of one of those moments of Gabby just being like, "I'm going to go to ministry school." And I was like,
it wasn't like
sure.
a little thing.
No, it wasn't a little moment.
Maybe I'll have her on one of these days, because I love to hear her tell the story, because there's so much in it. And I think that all of us in our own way, I say all of us, the Mooney siblings, I call myself one now. I've grafted in.
You've been grafted.
But I think all of us at some point or other have run from a calling that God has obviously put on us, even if we aren't aware of it. So anyway.
Yes. Going back to your point, I think that I'm just a big advocate and believer in prayer and, generational wisdom that is passed down, and just these roots that are kind of dug into the ground. I mean, so deeply, in both of our families. It's not just my parents or your parents, it's our grandparents and it's their parents. It's so deeply rooted in my family. And I just think that, I'm such a big proponent of that, of having, obviously, things happen unexpectedly, but I also think that, you have to put yourself in those positions in order for God to do something crazy. Well,
it's that position of obedience.
Yes. But also being just around. I think about people that, want to make it in the music industry. It's like you can't even begin to think about that unless you're here and you are present. You have to be present to win. And I just think that, showing up sometimes, that's whenever God can do some of the most unexpected things. Just being there and being present, you have to be there. And that's I guess, advice that I would give to young people moving to Nashville. We'll just take that piece and move it over there to an hour ago when we were talking about advice for young people. But I think that you have to be present, in order for God to do some of these unexpected things. But it does amaze me, though, because I look back and, having Asher changed everything for us. It was a couple really hard years. We didn't get to have the honeymoon phase. There was none of that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to think, we dated long distance for a year.
Yeah.
Got pregnant. And then I, declare to you that I will not move without a commitment. Even though you'd already asked Dad's blessing and I had a baby in my belly, I was like, "I'm not moving." And it was a whole thing. And I was very mad and upset. And again, that was a whole season of a lot for me personally. But we did. And I announced this last year, and we're about to have actually our next anniversary, our first anniversary, because the day that you proposed, we got married the same day. Yeah. But after we got married, I moved to Nashville. We bought our first house. I quit my job. I left my family and my friends. I was pregnant. I was 25 years old. You were on the road over 200 shows that year.
Yeah.
And then more of those days were gone traveling. And so that was a season of just trying to keep my head in severe depression.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, they talk about postpartum depression a lot, but there's prenatal depression. And so I had that, and you were gone. And then the whole wrestling for you, I think,
I didn't want to be at that point. I got scared
At
of
that
being
point,
losing my youth, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
No. You went through, and you're a year younger than I am. So I was 25, you were 24, and your career is starting to really pick up.
Yeah.
And then here you are with a wife and about to be a newborn at home. And you felt trapped, right?
Yeah. Thinking about how young I was, first of all, I can't believe how old I am now. It's devastating. But, you know, thinking about being 24 and going through all this, I think that at 24 at that point, I thought that I kind of had it together. I thought I was like mature. I was so wrong.
Oh.
You know, I mean, I look back and I was so dumb. And I just think that at that point, I was starting to feel like I was trapped is the wrong word. I think I didn't necessarily feel trapped, but I felt like I was grasping on to what remained of my early 20s.
Right.
And not getting to go out with my friends. And,
I would consider it a really rebellious season.
Yeah.
Because it was like you resented the fact that you had a wife and you're about to have a baby, or you had a newborn baby, and that you were young, and that everyone else around you was single, and that your career is doing what it's doing. And when you came home, you wanted to go hang with your friends. And it was a lot, even for someone who is in a normal 9-to-5 career, but it is exponentially different for someone who is in a career where everything really, and I don't mean this in a bad way, is about you.
Yeah.
Right? And so it just magnified the unfairness of your situation.
Yeah. The poor me.
Yeah.
You know, situation, because it was like if I didn't have a wife and kids, like I'd be out there killing it,
right,
getting to play Golden Tee every night,
every night, and Tin Roof,
as I was doing,
which you were doing anyway.
Yeah. So that was a very rough season, I know, for you, but it was a rough season for both of us. Like we both kind of struggle with our own demons, but looking back on that now, though, it's like imagine if that didn't all happen, and imagine if we didn't get to learn those lessons.
Yeah. But there is something in that season that I do want to point out, and you might squirm a little bit, so you can shut me down if you want to. But I do want to talk about the importance of the company that you keep.
Yeah.
And also, that's when I started praying every night, and I didn't know what I was asking for, but I prayed for wisdom and discernment.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, that's really when my relationship with God took off, was in that, the deepest depression,
the deepest valleys.
Because I felt like I had nothing else.
Yeah. I
felt like I didn't have a husband I could depend on. Sorry.
You talking about somebody else, right?
Yeah. My other husband.
Yeah,
so I felt like I could only count on God. And so I'm really thankful for that. And that's when I started asking and having like a real conversation, like a real relationship with God. And I kind of drug your parents into it a little bit, not your parents, but your mom. I was very honest with her about some of the things I was struggling with, and they prayed. I mean, they prayed over us. And
because there was a moment there that it was like,
there was a moment, and I'm going to say it in, I guess, the gentlest way I can, but it was probably the lowest point. And you really were far from me in my heart. And I felt like you were far from God.
Yeah.
And I felt like you were choosing, like purposefully choosing a life that was different than what I knew we were supposed to have. And that hurt. And part of that we've, kind of found later was in the company that you were keeping. Yeah. And I kind of...
Could have been people you were keeping around too. We don't know. We're not going into the specifics,
newborn,
but
it's the only person I knew at the time. So
he was a bad influence on you, I think.
And so I think I kind of, for the first time in my adult life, which I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, so I'm a very quiet, like I never like to ruffle any feathers, but I finally kind of put my foot down and was like, hey, I can't control a lot. I can't control really anything outside of our house. Can't make decisions for you, but this is what I can do. And this is what I will do for us, for our baby. And like, I love you and I'm praying for you. But some of the people that you're around, they are not allowed in our house. They are not allowed around our kids. And there's really nothing else I can do outside of be a good wife and be a good mom and to lead our baby in Christ the best way I can while you're figuring it out.
Yeah. You laid the hammer down.
But
and at that point,
but a gentle hammer.
It wasn't as gentle as it was perfectly placed hammer. And I needed that kick in the pants to really kind of make some decisions for myself, of in those moments where we were both at our lowest. I mean, I just think that there was so many things I was struggling with of just being like, I don't know if I can do this or if I even deserve to be a dad like this, Not that I ever thought of leaving Asher, out of my life or anything like that, but it was
that's something else. Divorce was never...
Yeah, it was never
in
the cards
either.
Yeah.
I mean, both of us were like, divorce is not an option, so some things are going to give it.
Yeah, we're like, well, what do we do? We kill each other? What's going to happen? Something's going to happen. But those are the moments, though, that I look back and I'm so, in a weird way, I'm very thankful for them, which is a weird thing to say. It sucked. It was a horrible thing to have to go through. But some of the lowest times now, you watch God turn them into good things.
Good things.
Those are hard lessons to learn, and human beings make mistakes, and they're very stupid, and that's very evident throughout the Bible that, they're just always doing dumb things. I mean, David was, what an idiot, doing some horrible things, but he's a man after God's own heart. And why is that? It's because his humility and the way that his relationship with God, in his heart. And that's one thing I always, I think I got from my mom. No matter how far I ever got from God, it could never get to that lowest. I needed to kind of get toward the bottom to really realize that, okay, I've got to get it together. But I always had it in me where I was like, I know where I need to be. I mean, you kind of mentioned that earlier of when I was in Atlanta. I was like, I know I have to make it to Nashville. I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I knew that you were the person that I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with. And I would think I was really struggling with that because me as a 7, I'm the adventurer. And I'm like, well, what if this isn't? So what if I could be out there doing whatever I want to do? It was never like, what if she's not the right girl? What if there's another person out there for me? It was never that. It was just, I felt like I was losing my freedoms, which was so stupid because now, in our relationship, our life is incredible. We get to hang out with the 2 sweetest, most incredible little boys and my most amazing wife. And what God had waiting kind of in the wings for us was so much better than what I could have imagined doing as a single guy. Like, what would I do? I'll be golfing every day,
Every day.
And there's no fulfillment. What I've gotten from being a dad and being a husband is so much more fulfilling.
Finding your joy.
Yes, I'll circle back to that because that's kind of where I started. The most important lesson that I had to learn, and it was a hard one in moments, but knowing that I do not find my joy in what I do. I love what I do, but my true joy and my true happiness is with you 3, and being with you guys and being in a place with God that I find peace and knowing that that's where I get it from. And I had a very real, human moment. It was during COVID, and I'm probably going to cry when I say this, so I'm just going to say that out loud so I can prepare myself. But I remember I had this moment, and it was a game changer for me because we were kind of in this time, before COVID, that our career was just exploding. I mean, we had just won our 3rd Grammy, and we won every award that you could possibly win that year. That was when Tequila and Speechless, had come out. And we were on top of the world. We had just sold out an arena tour, and we got 3 shows in, did 2 shows in Nashville at Bridgestone, and it got canceled. And it was like, well, crap, what do we do now? And that was a very depressed state that I got in during that moment because it was like, will I ever get to do this ever again? And this is what I've kind of found as my identity is being a singer, being in the, had been my whole life up to that point. And I was just like, what am I going to do now? Is this ever going to come back? I didn't know if it was ever going to come back. And then you had this whole political climate that kind of, started after that of all right, vaccine, no vaccine, you're a murderer if you don't get it. This is all these things, these narratives that were being pushed was terrifying to me. And I don't like being told what to do. And so
Meanwhile, we have a newborn.
Meanwhile, we have another newborn that was born 2 weeks before those first shows and right before COVID. And it was just a very scary time, in the world. But in the midst of all of that, I think we were probably kind of getting on the other side of like, the full on lockdowns. It was like the first, maybe 3 weeks or so after everything shut down.
Probably 6 months.
Okay, well, I'm not good with time, so you might have to help me with that.
Yeah.
Whenever it was right in the midst of, we were at home, nothing was really open, and I sat down.
And on my side, guys, I was thriving because
she was killing it, absolutely loving it.
I was a 9. I was at home for the first time with my whole family. My husband was not gone. We had a newborn and our 3-year-old, and for the first time in my life, I felt like our family was all together and was able to spend the time together, and that it was a gift for us.
Yeah.
And my husband was just the most depressed that he had ever been. And that was really hard for me. It was hard for me to see you like that. And selfishly, it was hard because I was like, are we not enough?
Yeah.
Like, this should be enough for you.
Yeah. I hated, knowing that you felt that way was tough because it's you have to think like that's all I had known to that point. A massive chunk of who I identified as was then ripped right at the peak. It was like right on the mountaintop, and then someone just kicks you right off of the mountain. You're like, well, dang it. But all this being said, the reason what I had to learn was that was not who I was. And Asher at the time was probably, I guess, 3. And I had this very human moment where I was sitting on the couch and I was looking up at the mantle, and we had 2 of the Grammys were sitting up there on like either side of the TV. I don't know where they came from, but they were up there for some reason. And I just had this moment where Asher ran by and he said, "Don't get my tickles, Daddy." And I was just like, and it was a moment that I will never forget because I looked up at that Grammy and I was so thankful that was not what I was chasing. And it was just it wrecked me. I mean, every time I think about it, I cry because it was such a revelation to me of like, oh, got it. And it was just a very life-changing thing for me because then I realized like I don't need all of this other stuff. I love it. I love doing it, and I was put on this earth to do that. But if it all went away tomorrow, I'd be okay. And that's about as much as I can get through right now. But yeah, that was a big lesson that I had to learn. And I think a lot of things started kind of coming together, and I think I started to kind of surrender a little bit after that. Yeah. Of just being like, okay.
I mean, a lot of things came together after that. I remember praying desperately, God, send men into Shay's life. Because I think so, too, in this world, in this city, something that is kind of hard to find is like-minded people. And I know that sounds strange because Nashville is such a community and there is such a presence of the church here.
Yeah, but there's such a pursuit.
But there's also a pursuit of
things.
Of the things and of
the social media,
fame
people,
and this
fame.
Industry and success, in whatever category that is for you.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I didn't even pray this for me, which is shocking because I didn't have a group of women, but I remember struggling thinking, I can't really be a part of a church group here because nobody else understands what it's like to be the wife of a touring artist. And also like, I really, not to be ugly, but I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a social liability when we go to award shows because I'm just like, what do they sing again? And that is terrible.
You don't know who anyone is, which is the funnest thing ever.
And it's not that I don't respect people and admire people, but I don't care what awards you win. And I don't care what your name is. And I don't care. I care about who people are, like what's in their heart, what they bring to the table as a human and as a child of God.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, for me, where I have found my tension of, okay, where do I find other like-minded people? But instead of praying for me, for like-minded people, I was praying for you. And I was like, okay, God, send men into my husband's life that he respects. Send men who he can relate to, he can look up to, but they know that you are their priority. That Shay knows that you, God, are their priority, even in the midst of all their success here on earth.
Yeah, that was another very unexpected thing that happened. I was coming back. This was probably, 2 days after you had prayed this?
It was a week after.
A week
I'd been
after.
praying really hard for a week.
Yeah. So I get back off the road, and I get back a little early, and I didn't tell you I was going to surprise you. And
I didn't tell you that I was going to go to the early service.
you didn't tell me you were going to the early service. So as I'm pulling in, same time you were leaving, and I was like, what the heck is she doing?
And I was like, we're going to the early service so we could see you when you get home. Get in.
And so I ran in and changed, and we were too late to make the early service in Nolensville, where we were going to church.
Yeah.
And we ended up going to the other campus of our church. And that was a very crazy, unexpected thing that happened, because we were like, we walk in the door and we're already not even supposed to be here, and we were supposed to be going to the early service.
Not a soul. Just totally empty.
There was nobody in the hallway, which is, now that I look back on it, thinking about how busy
Wild.
it is, that is a wild thing, because there's always like 50 people in the concourse right there.
More than 50.
More than 50. And I walked in, and the first person that I see is Carrie Underwood. And I'm like, well, we know one person.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is the most Nashville thing ever. You go to church and you see a superstar. And so we said hey, and I hugged her, and I had never met her husband, Mike. And it was literally probably 5 minutes after that, she invited us to come sit with her. And after church, I met Mike and got his number. And we
were in line to pick up the kids.
Yes, pick up the kids. And they invited us to lunch at their house the next week. And that was just, looking back on it, it was such an impactful moment, because Mike became that mentor, that kind of rock for me. And it was like right after you'd prayed for it. And I had not met anyone that was like that in my life up to this point, in Nashville.
In that same week, I mean, I've got to write a book, because God really hears and God really answers.
Yeah.
Like above and beyond what we ask.
The very next week, I met Chris Tomlin.
Yeah. You went out.
wrote some songs with him.
And you wrote with Chris Tomlin. And then you became a part of the Bible study group at church with some really incredible men. And I was just like, thank you, Jesus. But at the same time, God started sending women into my life. And I'm like, wow. It was really humbling for me, because I never asked for me.
Yeah.
I asked for you. And God was like, no. You need people too.
Yeah.
You need community too.
And I know that there was a lot of people praying for that, including myself, of, all right, well, now Hannah needs what she prayed for me about, And it was such a game changer to have other guys that knew what it was like to be in this industry, but also like, Mike is now retired from, the NHL, and he has way more time. He's not touring. And so it was a really fun thing for me to have someone who knew what it was like, kind of to be married to someone who does what I do. But it was just so funny, because Mike is the you of the relationship, and so you always usually marry someone opposite. And so Mike has just been he's like the you, in my life. He's probably a 9 as well. I don't know what he is, but he's very patient and calm and very steady. And I have to have a steady hand in my life, because I am a absolute electric circuit of energy.
Or I actually call I don't know that you know this, but I actually call you like the pinball.
100%.
Because, pinball machine, it's like ding, 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 ding.
I'm a pinball machine if there were not parameters. I'm a pinball in the open world.
Yes. And I have always said, we'll go into a room and I just lose you. And I'm just like fully panicked, becoming a wallflower while you're just being a bouncy ball around the room. But I love that about you. Right. You complete me, babe. Anyway, thank you for sharing all of that. And I wanted you to touch on it, because I really wanted to double down on the importance of the people that you surround yourself with. Because in that really bad season, a few years before, you were around people who did not have the same core values. Yeah. You were around people who did not place God at the center of their lives, of their families' lives. They did not have, even if they said that they had that as their foundation, which there's a lot of deception out there in the world. And there are a lot of people who go around saying, I'm a Christian, but their actions meet what their mouth is saying. Yeah. It's just 100%. Lip service. Yeah. And you can tell them by their fruit. And so something that I would say if I was giving advice to people, to young people, to really anyone, is just that prayer for discernment. Because I prayed that prayer of discernment and God showed me.
Yeah.
And I've since prayed that almost every night for years. And I've asked for supernatural discernment of people's spirits. And I know that sounds like, ooh, that sounds like a lot. But what I mean by that is I want to know a person's heart.
Yeah.
And I think that God will show you that if you're asking for that discernment.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of times people can choose to, because especially for you in that season, I think I can say this, you kept your eyes closed to it. I think you knew.
Yeah.
I think you knew the company you were keeping.
At that point, I didn't
But
really
they were telling
care.
they were telling you, oh yeah, I go to this church. Oh yeah, I do this with all these people in these circles. That sounds good, but I think that you knew that their character didn't align with that. And so you can't just ask God for discernment, but you have to be willing to open your eyes to it, because sometimes that also means pruning people from your life.
Yeah.
And that can be uncomfortable and it can be sad.
Yeah.
You know, because some people, they might be a part of your life like they were old-time friends.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand that as we grow and as our relationship deepens with Christ, some people don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And some people aren't ready, and some people will never choose to go there.
Yeah.
It's not to say that we can't love them.
For sure. It's okay to love those people, but the problem is in your life, you have to make sure that you are getting filled up more than you are giving out. Because if you're, when I would hang with Mike a lot and I'm going to these Bible studies, I just found myself, it was easier also to love those people and know that, like, whatever it was in their life that was bringing negativity, I was able to give them something rather than me go there, be empty, and they pour all of their crap onto me, you know? And so it's important to love those people, but it's the most important, especially with what both of us do, it's important to be continually, filling yourself up with, the word and to make sure that before you try to go out and to pour into somebody else, that you yourself are getting filled up.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. That would have been a better way to put it and a lot shorter. But I'm so blown away by what God has done, in our lives and through us and the things that we've gotten to do. And it's incredible. And I love, your podcast is so amazing because I feel like Unexpected really, it sums up the moments of our lives, of all of our lives, not just you and I, but it's an incredible thing. And, you tell stories about it all the time on the podcast, but stories in the Bible, most every story that is great that we love in the Bible happened literally out of nowhere.
Yeah.
One day, David's chilling in a field, gets chosen, goes and kills Goliath.
A teenage boy. Not even wearing armor, and goes and kills the giant.
Yes.
And Nehemiah is the cupbearer to the king.
Yeah. We don't have to tell the whole story. But
I know, but I'm just
we're going
saying,
into David now.
I'm just saying.
No, but it's unbelievable. Like the things that you don't know are happening. And God's like, yeah, this is going to happen, but you have no idea what I have waiting, in the wings for you.
Right.
And I look now about, looking back is so easy because it's like, oh yeah, that happened. And you kind of take it for granted. And it's just like, now that I look back on some of the things that have happened, I'm like, not only were they unexpected, they were insane that happened at that particular time. And you kind of chalk it up to coincidence at the time.
I know.
But then you look back.
I don't anymore.
I can't anymore because it's just like, oh, of course that would happen. And I almost like laugh sometimes because you'll tell me you're praying for something and then it happens. And I'm like, of course that would, of course I was waiting for this to happen. And, I feel like when you're living a life and praying for things, I think you have to be expecting the unexpected and you have to be waiting for that and ready because it's going to happen because it's called unexpected. You're not going to know when it's happening, but you do have to be prepared for the unexpected because those are the biggest moments that, changed all of our lives and the trajectory, like you were talking about earlier, that completely changed the way that our life went. I don't know where I'd be now though, if I didn't go through those tough times and we didn't get married, we didn't meet and didn't have children. I would probably be still playing Golden Tee at Doghouse, with my friends, and I'm so thankful that is not where my life went, and not that there's anything wrong with anybody listening that's down at Doghouse playing Golden Tee right now. It's a great game.
I don't think my demographic
like to
is
enjoy
there.
it. I don't think
they're there.
It's an amazing thing though to look at where God's taken us and what He's brought us out of. And
I'm thinking too about what if that hadn't happened?
We probably wouldn't be together.
We talk all the time about what if we hadn't had Asher.
Yeah, we might not be together, honestly.
Honestly, and I've told you this. I think there was a lot of me that would have gotten cold feet about marrying into this industry. And I think that God was like, too bad.
Yeah.
You got a baby.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
We're doing
and it was just kind of like locking it in. And so I just think, unexpected, it was God given. He gave me that. And I saw how universal it was. I saw how timeless it was. And I just see so much hope in it.
Yeah.
Because I want people to be able to look at their lives and look at those moments as a point of God changed the trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, the most unexpected thing ever is that you have a podcast.
Right. I mean, I'm like the most introverted, quiet person ever. And I remember, I came to you and I was like, Dad, gummit. God has given me this.
You were furious.
I wasn't furious. I was just overwhelmed because I was like, that's just not, I was like, you're the one that's supposed to be a voice. Ooh, and I can't wait to tell that story later about how God told me something about a voice too. So
absolutely.
Anyway, I kind of want to tie this up with that final thought of just, I hope that whoever's listening is able to view their own story as God working in those unexpected places and not, oh, my life didn't go the way I thought it was going to go.
Yeah.
And instead viewing it as my life totally became something unexpected. How did God use that? Or where was God in that? Because that's His business, is working all things to the good.
Yeah.
And so He will be in it. And I think sometimes the fact that you and I have the privilege of seeing, some of the awesome stuff that God has worked out for us, that's just icing on the cake. Because I think sometimes people go to heaven and their grandchildren will be the ones that see the fruit of it, or, the effects of that decision. We don't always get to see the end result, but I think a lot of times God likes to give us a glimpse into why He did the thing that He did, or how He's turning the thing that He's turning. Because God doesn't always do the bad things.
The bad things that He turns for good are almost never, probably never things that God has placed you in.
And maybe it was because maybe He was trying to get you to that rock bottom place.
Definitely, it was sometimes. But I think that is the beauty of grace and how the Lord works, is most of the time it's us doing something stupid to get us in that place.
Yep.
As far as our decisions and things, but that's the beauty of what God can do. And I think that it's probably Psalms 91, I would assume, talking about when you're in the depths, I am there, and on the top of the mountain, I'm still there. And I think about that scripture a lot because kind of the analogy earlier of talking about where I find my joy and where I find my peace. I always thought about a mountaintop and thinking of it as far as my career goes, of where we were at on that mountaintop. And then finally realizing that I had the joy with me the whole time. Going to the top of the mountain is icing on the cake. That's great. But wherever I am, it's like, looking around and being like, well, who's with you on the mountain? And knowing that is the important part of it. It doesn't matter where you're at on the mountain. And finding your joy and your peace in that moment and who you're with and like the life that you're living. And it's an amazing thing because I look back on that scripture and I'm like, that's kind of a hidden message in there of like, wherever you're at, it doesn't matter if you're in the depths. God is still there in those moments, just like He is on the mountaintop. And I always think about, yes, God is there in the depths with us, but His perspective is like all we can see when we're in the valley is the valley. We can't see anything. And we're just like, this is the worst part of my life. I'm depressed. I'm angry, and I don't know where I'm going. And God, the whole time, He's all knowing. He sees everything. And He's like, if you could, because when you look back on your life and you're looking at the low points, it's pretty easy to look back and be like, oh yeah, that sucked pretty bad back there, But when you're back in a good place, you're like, oh yeah, it's fine. And God the whole time is like, it's going to be fine. Even though you can't see around you and you're in this really depressed valley that you're in, just know that God is with you in that time. And not only is He there, but He knows where you're going to be and where He wants to take you. And that's why just finding those moments. And I've heard somebody, I think it might have been Tom Hanks, say this in an interview recently of what he wishes someone would have told him early on in his career. And I just thought it was so great. It has nothing to do with the Bible or anything, but it's a great quote. It can be applied. And he said, I wish someone would have told me that this too shall pass. And it's obviously, that's an old, probably Lord of the Rings reference. I'm pretty sure it's in that movie. And maybe that's you shall not pass. I don't know.
No, baby, I think that's the
Well,
Bible.
it is the Bible. But talking about those moments of, all right, this is a really hard thing that you're going through right now, but this too shall pass. You're in a high, you just won a Grammy, you're up there in the clouds, that too shall pass. And I feel like finding that just the even joy in just the everyday, sometimes in your head, mundane things, but the joy in being with your family and having these little moments and little wins. It's not about the highs and it's not about the lows. It's just about finding that peace and that joy and knowing that if you're feeling like hot stuff, then you're not going to be that forever, and that it helps you kind of stay humble in those moments. But I think for young people that are moving to town and listening to this podcast, whether it doesn't have to be moving to Nashville, but you're doing something scary for the first time, you have to go into it, head first and know that any struggles that you may run into, that too shall pass. And you have to just keep your head down and know that God's got it.
But can I point out too that probably the centerpiece to all of it is that foundation that we have? Because I think that there are probably a lot of people in the secular world that recognize that it is about, quote unquote, the journey.
Yeah.
But that peace and that profound purpose and feeling known is in that relationship with Christ.
100%.
And knowing through all of it that we are God's child.
Yeah.
And that He has put us here with purpose and that He has gifted us with different things, that He has made us each uniquely and fearfully and wonderfully.
Yeah.
And, this life is just a drop in the bucket of eternity. And what we do with our time here,
it matters.
It matters.
Yeah.
It matters because it's not just about making it to the mountaintop and it's not just about getting through it when we're in the valley.
Yeah.
But it's about pointing people to Christ wherever we are in that spectrum.
Yeah. About that peace, because you don't get the highs and the lows are one thing and finding joy in that. I think anyone can find some joy by meditating, whatever they do.
Well,
that's not necessarily.
I don't call that joy. I think joy is a fruit of the Spirit.
A little bit happiness, finding what they think is a pretty empty happiness on the surface, but you will never have true peace, in my opinion, without Jesus.
Yeah.
Because I've tried a lot of other things, and it's, that's definitely the main thing that one should take from this very jumbled interview, that it's the only thing that got us through. I mean,
if we hadn't had
tough
that,
times,
if we had not had our foundation,
yeah,
we wouldn't. I mean, I can say that with confidence. It wouldn't have been good.
Yeah, we wouldn't know where to turn in those moments.
And I think that one of the greatest gifts in having children too is in seeing how God loves us.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even fathom. Like, as much as I love our babies, God loves each of us like that.
Yeah.
And so, what a gift.
What a gift. Two of them.
Baby, thank you for coming on today.
Well, you're very welcome.
And for being honest and vulnerable. And, I love it when you cry. That's part of the reason
now we'll cut all that out.
Because we won't cut it out. It is heart.
No, but I'm very proud of you for stepping out of your comfort zone and doing this podcast. And it's a pretty amazing thing. And I'm just a very proud husband.
Well,
and I love to,
part of
and
the
I love
reason,
hearing your voice. You got a good voice.
Well, thank you. Part of the reason that I get to do it is because you are such a supporter and always have been of anything that I want to do. And so I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for you in general. I'm thankful for the valleys that we've been through. I'm thankful for the mountains that we will get to and the in-between. And I just pray that from this conversation, people hear and know that the centerpiece is Christ in us and the foundations in Christ that our parents laid for us so that we can lay them for our babies. And that hopefully whoever meets us along the way, I know it's one of my greatest joys when we run into people who have known us from, the time that we started dating, and they'll say, I want a marriage like yours.
Yeah. And we're like,
whoo, that is
careful what you wish for there, buddy.
But to know that people are watching.
Yeah.
And to know that, and again, this is a reason I like to have this podcast and I like to bring light to things, because people see us on Instagram and it is the highlight reel.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to be able to pull back that curtain and say, whew, like we have gone through a lot to get to where we are.
Yeah.
And wouldn't have made it through any of it without Christ.
Yeah.
And so I hope that any of those listening today have found encouragement in that. I hope that they have found encouragement in the season that they're in. If they are new to town, if they are in that muddled place of graduating high school or graduating college and looking for the thing, I really do encourage you to listen to what God is asking and following His Spirit and following that next step, as unexpected as it may be, because in that obedience, there will be blessing.
Mm.
And I just really, really hope that anyone listening today has found that hope and found that encouragement. And if nothing else, that they can look at the unexpected in their life and say, I guess I see how God worked there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if you've made it this far in the podcast, good on you.
Good on you.
This is our 2-day series. It's a 24-hour podcast.
We might have to break this up into 2. No.
This is going to be a 6-episode series.
I'm thankful for you.
Thankful for you, baby.
I love you so much. I'm thankful that Jesus has seen us through a lot, and He's going to see us through a lot more. So
that's right. We hope you enjoyed this.
This is a Moon Song production.
Song production.
I'm just kidding.
No, I love you, and thank you for having me on. And hopefully you guys had some fun with us. I feel like we had a therapy session right in the middle of that.
I know. That
felt really great to cry with you. I'm okay with it. I'm okay as a man.
I should have brought tissues. I should have known to bring tissues.
Yeah, no one can see this, but when I started tearing up, Hannah hands me a tissue paper about the size of a quarter.
Well, it's because I had already blown my nose on the other half, and I didn't want to give you any slimming tissue. Right. So we can cut this part out.
There we go.
I love you.
I love you.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Unexpected.
Thank you so much for listening today. If this episode has encouraged you, please feel free to share it with your family and friends. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, and my hope is that this show is a candle in the dark.